The morning sun struck the mirrored walls of Silverstone Industries, making the skyscraper shimmer like a blade against the skyline. Inside, the air buzzed with tension. Phones rang, printers hummed, and the faint click of heels echoed through the polished marble floors. But beneath the corporate perfection, there was fear, a silent, shared anxiety that came from working under one man's shadow. Richard Hale, the CEO. Near the far end of the open office, a young woman sat quietly at her desk. Her name was Emily Carter. She was in her late 20s, soft-spoken, diligent, and always the first to arrive and last to leave. But today, her hands trembled slightly as she typed, the soft glow of her monitor reflecting off her tired eyes. Her belly, gently rounded beneath her blouse, moved slightly, a reminder that life was growing inside her. Even as she fought to hold her own place in this harsh world, her co-workers glanced at her with sympathy and fear. They'd heard the rumors. Richard had been complaining about her slowing down, whispering that maybe maternity leave wasn't something the company could afford right now, but Emily tried to block out the whispers. She focused on the numbers before her, columns of data, transactions, balances, until the faint ding of the elevator shattered the stillness. The doors slid open. Richard Hale stepped out. He was the embodiment of power. Tall, sharp-featured, with eyes that could freeze a conversation mid-sentence. His black suit looked tailored for intimidation, and when he walked, even the floor seemed to fall silent beneath him. "Morning, everyone," he said, his tone cutting through the chatter like glass. "Meeting room, now." Chairs scraped. Coffee cups clinked. Dozens of employees filed into the gleaming conference room, their reflections trembling in the polished glass table. Richard didn't sit. He stood at the head, flipping through a folder with brisk precision. "Someone," he said without looking up, "messed up the quarterly report. The numbers for our West Coast client are off by nearly $10,000. Care to explain who handled that account?" The silence was thick enough to choke on, and then every eye turned toward Emily. Richard's gaze followed theirs, landing squarely on her. "Ms. Carter," Emily swallowed hard. "Sir, I reviewed that report, but the entries were uploaded by—" He slammed the folder shut. "Enough!" His voice thundered across the table. "Do you think I care who uploaded it? You supervised it. You were responsible." Her heart raced. The baby kicked, and as if sensing her fear, "Please, Mr. Hale," she stammered softly. "I've double-checked those files every night this week." There must be a mistake somewhere in the system, but he cut her off with a cold laugh. "A mistake in you, Ms. Carter, not the system." The room went still. Some employees lowered their heads. Others looked away. They all knew. Once Richard set his sights on someone, there was no mercy. He stepped closer, towering over her. "You've been distracted, slow, unfocused. This company doesn't run on sympathy." Emily's eyes shimmered, but she refused to look away. "Sir, with respect, I've given everything to this job. Even when the doctor told me to rest, You should have rested," he snapped. "At home, permanently." The words hit her like a slap. Her breath hitched. "You're firing me." "In front of everyone," he replied coldly. "Effective immediately." Gasps filled the room. A pen rolled off the table and clattered onto the floor, breaking the silence like a gunshot. Emily stood frozen, her vision blurring as humiliation washed over her. She had poured 5 years into this place, stayed late, skipped meals, covered for others, and now, this, dismissed like she was nothing. But what happened next would shock everyone watching. Emily's trembling hand reached for her desk. Slowly, she began gathering her things, a framed photo of her ultrasound, a small ceramic mug with fading letters that read, "You got this." No one moved. Even the air felt heavy, charged with disbelief. Richard turned away, already moving toward the door. "Security will escort you out," he said flatly, "and clear your access by noon." That was when Emily's voice, quiet but steady, broke through the silence. "Mr. Hale." He stopped. Didn't turn. She took a deep breath, clutching her folder to her chest like armor. Her tears were gone now, replaced by something sharper. Resolve. "One day," she said softly, "you'll understand what it means to lose something that matters." The words seemed to hang in the air, echoing through the glass walls like a ghost. Richard finally turned his head, his jaw tightening. For a moment, just a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Doubt, guilt, fear. Then it vanished. Replaced by the same icy disdain, Emily walked past him, her heels clicking against the floor like fading echoes of defiance. The elevator doors closed behind her with a soft chime, and in that silence, something shifted. Richard looked back at the table, at the empty chair where Emily had sat, and for the first time in years, he couldn't focus. The faces of his employees were pale, uneasy. Whispers began again, this time louder. He ignored them. But deep down, a chill crawled up his spine as if her words had planted something in him. Something he didn't want to face. He straightened his tie, pretending not to feel it, pretending he was still in control. But the echo of her voice wouldn't fade. One day, you'll understand what it means to lose something that matters. Outside, the wind howled against the glass, rattling it softly, almost like a warning. Richard didn't know it yet, but those words would come back to haunt him in ways he could never imagine. If you believe no one deserves humiliation for standing up for themselves, hit that like button and share this story to spread kindness. The storm began just as the lights inside Silverstone Industries flickered for the first time in years. Rain lashed against the tall glass windows, streaking down like tears across the company's once proud symbol of success. The empire that Richard Hale had built with pride and ruled with fear was finally crumbling. Inside his office on the top floor, the silence was suffocating. The usual hum of printers and chatter from assistants had vanished. All that remained was the ticking of the clock and the restless drumming of rain on glass. Stacks of reports covered Richard's mahogany desk, each one another nail in the coffin of his collapsing legacy. The company had just lost its biggest client, Westmark Holdings, the same account that once made Silverstone a corporate powerhouse. They didn't leave quietly. They left publicly, announcing their withdrawal to the press after discovering financial discrepancies in Silverstone's quarterly statements. Stockholders panicked. The board demanded answers, and for the first time in his career, Richard Hale had none. He buried his face in his hands, frustration clawing at his composure. His empire, the one he had ruled like a king, was falling apart piece by piece. But what no one else knew, not yet, was that the error at the center of the crisis wasn't new. It was old, very old, and it had Emily Carter's name on it. Richard stared at her name printed on an archived report buried deep in his files. His jaw tightened. The same woman he had fired publicly, humiliated, for an error that, he now realized, might have been the key to saving his entire company. He opened the report again, his eyes darting across the pages. The paper was slightly yellowed from time, but her handwriting was clear, careful, meticulous. A small note at the bottom caught his attention, one he had never read before. If not addressed, this discrepancy could grow into a system-wide loss. Recommend urgent audit within the next quarter. EC! He froze. The very problem destroying Silverstone now was the one she had tried to prevent years ago. Richard's hand trembled as he leaned back in his chair. Lightning cracked across the skyline, casting his reflection in the glass, pale, hollow, and frightened. The realization hit him like a blow. Emily hadn't failed him. He had failed her. But what happened next would shock everyone watching. The following week was chaos. Reporters camped outside the building. Employees quit without notice. Board members whispered behind closed doors about replacing him. Richard's arrogance, the armor he once wore so confidently, began to crumble under the weight of guilt. At night, he couldn't sleep. Emily's voice echoed in his head, her last words haunting him like a quiet prophecy. One day, Mr. Hale, you'll understand what it means to lose something that matters. And now he finally did. He had lost everything. Days later, in a desperate attempt to find answers, or perhaps redemption, Richard began searching for her. He called former employees, checked old HR records, even reached out to her emergency contact from years ago. It took him nearly a week, but one evening, as the city lights blinked below his car window, his assistant's voice trembled over the phone. Sir, we found her. The address wasn't what he expected. Not a corporate office, not a competitor's firm. It was a small, modest building on the east side of town, a community charity center called New Beginnings Foundation. When Richard arrived, the contrast was almost poetic. The towering skyscrapers he once ruled over were miles behind him. Here, the air smelled of rain and fresh paint. Children's laughter echoed from a nearby hallway. Through the large windows, he saw her, Emily Carter, sitting at a wooden desk, helping a young woman fill out a job application. Her hair was tied back. Her smile was gentle. There was no trace of bitterness on her face, no sign of the humiliation she had endured. She looked free. Richard hesitated at the door, suddenly unsure of what to say. His reflection in the glass door looked smaller now, less like a CEO and more like a man stripped bare of pride. When she finally looked up and saw him, her expression flickered. Surprise, confusion, and then calm recognition. "Mr. Hale," she said softly, standing. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The rain outside softened, a faint rhythm filling the silence. "I read your report," he finally said, his voice low, almost broken. "You were right. About everything." Emily's eyes glistened, but she said nothing. She simply waited, as if she already knew why he had come. "I was cruel," he continued. "I thought power meant being feared. I didn't see that you were trying to protect this company, even when I was trying to destroy your dignity." He took a shaky breath, his voice trembling now. "Because of me, you lost your job, your security, everything, and now—" He paused, lowering his gaze. "Now I've lost it all too." Emily's eyes softened. She stepped closer, her tone calm, steady, filled with something he hadn't heard in years. "Compassion. Sometimes," she said, "life takes away everything so we can finally see what truly matters." Richard's shoulders sank. For the first time, the powerful CEO couldn't hide behind titles or pride. He nodded slowly, tears glinting in his eyes. "I don't expect forgiveness," he whispered, "but I needed to tell you. I'm sorry." Emily smiled gently, the corners of her lips trembling. "You already have it," she said. "Not because you deserve it, but because carrying hate hurts more than losing anything." Her words struck him deeper than any boardroom defeat ever could. Richard turned to leave, but paused at the door. He looked back at her, this woman he once broke, now standing taller than he ever had. "You were right," he said quietly. "I finally understand." She smiled faintly. "Then maybe that's enough." As he stepped into the rain, his reflection blurred in the puddles, washed away by the storm, a symbol of the man he once was. Weeks later, no one knew who the anonymous donor behind New Beginnings Foundation was. But every month, a large check arrived, signed only with the initials RH, and inside the charity center, sunlight streamed through the windows as Emily helped another struggling mother find hope. Her voice was soft, her laughter warm, as if life had come full circle. But little did she know, one final twist was still waiting. Something that would prove Richard's redemption wasn't over yet. What would you have done if you were in Emily's place? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your words might inspire someone today.